Thanks, Paul, and welcome everybody to our 26th Forecast Conference. We're going to kick things off, as Paul mentioned, with a forecasting panel. And I felt in an era of fake news, it brought me great joy and comfort to tell you that the next set of speakers will be presenting data and facts. You, of course, might disagree on what those facts mean, but at least there will be facts. We'll begin with Dr. James Glassman, who's the Managing Director and Head Economist for Commercial Banking at JP Chase. He's going to give us an outlook on the U.S. economy and what that means for U.S. healthcare. Michael Wilson, a partner at Mercer Health and Benefits, will discuss trends in health insurance coverage and benefit plan design and what it means for us as employers, businesses, and maybe even consumers. And William Hoagland, Senior VP at the Bipartisan Policy Center, will discuss the outlook on federal health policy. So this should be a very interesting and exciting set of speakers. I want to welcome first up James Glassman. As I mentioned, he's Managing Director and Head Economist for Commercial Banking at JP Chase. And among his many laurels, he's a long-standing respondent to the survey of professional forecasters run by the Philadelphia Fed, the longest-running quarterly survey of macroeconomic forecasts in the U.S., and is used to construct the anxiousness survey. So here you have our very own data point into the anxiousness index. Thank you.
Morning. He's almost as old as the survey. Welcome our new panelists. Bill, you've got some big shoes to fill. Your predecessor, I always look forward to this conference because every year about this time we would get an update on Lady Gaga's performance and what a year it was so far. Even I'm a fan now. Metallica. The state of the world in 20 minutes. So I think what people are struggling with right now is how is the market able to make, why are we expecting good things for the economy to come out of a situation like what we're dealing with when we don't really know what we're dealing with and it's going to take some time and we're hearing a conversation that we're not used to. The thing I think to remember is for us economists, this is about as close as you get to an unexpected event. And so when you see what's going on in the market, it has real economic meaning because since November 7, the equity market is up. It's created about $3 trillion of new wealth. And for economists, it's unexpected events that really give you new movements in spending. And this kind of event, as long as it sort of holds up, means that by itself, it might be enough to boost economic activity this year by a full percentage point. So if we just translate the way we look at equity wealth and how that translates into consumer spending. So I think, and by the way, you might think, well, the equity market, that's Wall Street. It's a bunch of people playing Nintendo. Wall Street, what goes on in the equity market is you guys. You call your broker calls the go-between in Wall Street. So Wall Street is America. It's not just a bunch of people sitting in front of screens in New York City. So I think the way, obviously there's a lot going on here, and I think one way that we're all trying to think about this is, for me, the way I'm thinking about it is you got to close your ears and just think about what is the meaning of what's going on here and tune out the people and tune out the words. And I think it's been a useful way to think about things. So think about a year ago, we were, as the election season started, we thought the debate, there was a debate building, we thought the debate was going to center around two big economic issues, things that mattered. How to figure out how to re-energize the US economy to offset what's going on demographically. And second of all, how do we deal with our core challenge that the CBO has been telling us about for some time. How do we get our hands around healthcare reform? How do we manage healthcare resources better? And we thought the debate was going to be between Hillary and the guy with low energy. And then the whole thing turned into a freak show. And we lost sight of all the economic issues. And we economists sort of gave up thinking that we're ever going to get back to these core economic issues. And then by how it happened, you realized 10:30 Eastern Time, November 8th, that something was changing, and it has something to do with Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. And so here we are talking about economic issues, all the issues that we thought we were going to be talking about. How do we re-energize the economy, rethink some of the regulations, infrastructure investment, tax reform. There is a lot of other stuff going on that's is nerve-wracking, but the truth is, the fact that we are sitting here and actually debating economic issues is, in my mind, the way to think about what's going on. I think that's why the equity market is got hope that something good is going to come out of all this, because we are trying to figure out, the whole election kind of put the focus back on how do we address these economic issues. So I think that's what the conclusion you're supposed to come to is, we don't know where this can go, but you should have interpreted this to mean that we're going to get more pro-growth kinds of actions out of all this, and know it's going to take time. We don't know. You know, there's probably more differences within the Republican Party than there are between Republicans and Democrats, so we don't really know. But I think it makes sense right now to believe that what's going to come out of all this is something that's going to give the economy more of a boost. So I want to hop through like 7 questions, because I think it's important to understand the economic backdrop for all of this, and to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense in the debate that we're going to have. And I think the first question is, how are we doing? How's the U.S. economy doing? And I got to tell you, good. We're doing fine. And think of it this way. If I fell asleep in 2009, knowing what I knew at the time, we'd had a massive speculation in the real estate market. When the music stopped, prices came down. We lost 1/3 of the value of our houses. It left about $3 trillion of mortgages underwater. And if you'd ask most economists, what's going on? What's it going to take to get out of the hole we got into? Most of us were looking at the experience of Japan. They'd had a bunch of bubbles in the early 1980s. It took them a long time to dig out of the hole that they'd gotten into. And I don't know anybody, most people thought back in 2009 that this might take a couple decades to get out. And what you're going to have to see is you're going to have to see the consumer pull back, save more, dig out of the hole that we'd gotten into. So if I'd gone to sleep in 2009 and I just woke up now, and you told me all the things that are going on, employment's up 16 million, the unemployment rate, which is sort of the standard that we use to figure out how to describe things, come back down from 10% to 4.8%. It's not the whole story, but it's a big part of the story. The auto industry is flying. The underwater problem doesn't exist really, unless you're in Phoenix. In California, ground zero of the real estate debacle, everybody here complains about prices too high, and it's hard for young people to buy into the market. The roads are jammed because we've got record number of people on the roads with jobs. GDP per capita, the living standard of this country, is now at an all-time record high. And the fiscal budget deficit, which exploded during the deficit, which it always does, has come back down to a roughly sustainable pace, which just means the debt's not growing faster than our economy. That's a very cyclical phenomenon. So any economist who, and by the way, one more thing, the equity market, the valuation of the equity market relative to very high earnings is returned to normal levels that you see in good years in a recovery. So anybody who woke up from a deep sleep in 2009 and they saw all this stuff would say, my God, that looks pretty normal. In fact, I claim the history books are going to describe this cycle as the best recovery we've had, because it's all happened within 7 or 8 years, and nobody imagined that that was possible back in 2009. Now, the question is, how did this happen? Well, really, we should have known about this. We've been talking about it for a long time. It's happened because in 2008, Bill Clinton, who is the leading edge of the baby boom generation, turned 62. And that was a signal that the baby boom, that we were finally there, where the baby boom generation is approaching retirement age. And what's happened is that the working age population is slowing down really dramatically. So that means the bar for the kind of growth we need to get the economy back on its feet has come down a fair amount. We don't really talk about we have never really talked much about demographics. I've had to do a couple things on demographics for Bobby Brown and Coors Beer because that's their customer base. But frankly, when it comes to macroeconomic trends, we really have not talked much about demographics because we found in this country that whenever the economy is doing well, regardless of what our demographics look like, we get a lot of immigration. That's not happening. And that's why people are shocked that we're getting this kind of recovery with 2% GDP growth. That's pretty shocking if you ask me. And I think most of us, if you told us back in 2009 we're going to grow 2%, we would say, I don't think that's a recovery. So just one PS for you. If you're interested in following economic data, I need to flag something for you because I think it's proven itself again. There's a lot of confusion when you look at the data. If you told me the economic growth rate of the economy, that doesn't tell me what's going to happen unless I know what the economy's growth potential is. So knowing, and the problem is, we're having a hard time. I'm not sure that the metrics are really keeping up with a lot of things that are going on in life, including this stuff. So it's not clear. When you look at numbers, you have to take things with a grain of salt. And so we've had a lot of confusion in the airwaves about what's going on in the economy. Is the economy growing or is it not? And I think there's one indicator that we've always known to be the true blue indicator of life. If you just need to know if you just follow one thing, you'll know 95% of the story of what's going on in the U.S. economy. And that's what I'm showing you on this picture. It's the number of people who apply for unemployment benefits. You lose a job, you go file for unemployment benefit, jobless claims. The reason it's so valuable is because, unlike everything else we have in our economic system, if you lose a job, it doesn't matter where you live, who you work for, small company, big company. If you lose a job, you go file for unemployment benefit. I see you the next week. Every Thursday morning, I see what's going on across America in every corner. And of course, it doesn't tell you how much unemployment there is. It's just telling you whether the economy is veering off the road or not. And what it's been telling us since March of 2009 is layoffs are dropping dramatically. And we're in a zone, we're in the all good zone. And despite all the worries that pop up now and then and the disruptions going on in the energy sector and other areas, what this trend has been telling you is we're getting back on our feet. And we're at levels that I have not seen. Relative to the size of the workforce, this is pretty unbelievable. And I think the way to think about it is you look at this for a signal whether something bad's going on or something good's going on. Because if something bad's going on, you'll see layoffs picking up. We saw this in Texas and Oklahoma when they were having to cut back because of what's going on with the oil sector. But meanwhile, everybody else, we in the West Coast and everywhere else, we consumers benefit from all this. So the beauty of this indicator is it's timely, it's accurate, it's informative, and it's comprehensive. It tells you everything across the country. So just a useful thing to keep an eye on. So doing good. The question is, where are we in the economic cycle? That's an important thing to try to figure out because it helps you anticipate whether we got big problems we got to deal with, what's the Fed going to do with interest rates. And I think what I'm trying to show you here is a way to think about where we are in the economic cycle. What we normally look at as economists, we tend to look at the unemployment rate. We have an idea where full employment is. That green shaded area is my zone of the best you can do. At the top of that zone is kind of where we think the full employment level of the unemployment rate is. And that's where you want to be. And what the picture tells you is that our economy is very cyclical. We're always tripping up and then getting back on our feet. Tripping up and getting back on our feet. We economists never doubt. When bad things happen and we stumble, we really shouldn't doubt. We don't usually doubt that we're going to get back on our feet. But what the picture tells you is the other challenge is once we get back on our feet, we don't often stay there. And that's an important issue. So here's why this picture is useful to me. If you look at the official unemployment rate, 4.8%, most economists think that's where full employment is. It's 4.5% to 5%. We never really know for sure. You only know by watching what's going on with inflation. But if you take the official unemployment rate at face value, it implies that we're kind of back. we're back to full employment. The problem is our official unemployment measure is not capturing two big populations of people who are not really reflected in the unemployment rate, and it's kind of a unique thing that happened in this cycle. Normally, in good times, there's about 4 million people who are working part-time involuntarily. These tend to be people who work for family-owned businesses. You've got people that are like family, they have skills. If you get into trouble and you need to make adjustments, they tend to cut people's work time. And what happened in the recession is that for normal times, 4 million people, it went to 9 million. Huge amount, a huge increase in the number of people working part-time involuntarily. And the problem is, if you've got a job where you're working 1 hour or 40 hours, you're considered employed. You're not in the unemployment statistics. So that population of underemployed people is not in our official unemployment statistics. That second line up from the black line is my estimate of what it would look like if you counted the unemployed part of these part-timers. But the bigger issue is something even more unique that happened in this cycle. And I'm kind of an expert in this because I own one. Anybody who is 20 to 45 years of age, there's the young adult population, something really unique happened to them. They come out of school, you thought all you needed was a college degree, then the life is yours, and they come out, they can't find a job, and they vanished. They vanished because they have unemployment insurance called parents. And 3 million young people disappeared. And where'd they go? Look at the school enrollment. School enrollment went up by about 3 million. And why did this happen? When I got out of college, I knew I could not ask my parents for help because they didn't have the help to help me. Today, we hover, we want to hang on, and we have more resources. And the way to think about this is, when I was in school, and it wasn't yesterday, the living standard of our country was half of what it is today. In the 1960s and 70s, GDP per capita was half of what it is today. So families have more resources today. So when people come out, they can't find something, they have more help from family. And I think, and they're lucky, I think, or maybe not. When they come out and they realize what the world is like, those who went back, got a degree in physical therapy or occupational therapy or social work, they got out, they came out and they had less trouble finding a job. I know this problem really well. And I do an update every night, every Sunday night I do a 3-minute update for my colleagues on what did we learn last week, what are we looking for this week. My daughter's been hearing me do this ever since she was in kindergarten, and she got this idea that the bad things happen in the economy is because of me. So she and all her friends, I get inundated with emails about what they're doing because they know I'm interested in what happened to that generation. So 3 million people disappeared. They don't show up in the unemployment statistics. They're coming back now because the job market's doing better. And if you add those people into the picture, that's what that very top line tells you. And what it tells you, even though the official unemployment rate makes it look like we're in the 9th inning, the truth is, if you think about the labor market more broadly and these populations of hidden unemployment, I would say unemployment's more like 6-ish, which implies to me that we're more in the 8th inning. Janet Yellen must agree implicitly with this idea, because why would the Fed have rates close to 0, knowing it's going to take a couple of years for them to normalize everything, if they thought we were there right now? So personally, 8th inning is my view of where we stand. And so the real question isn't so much are we back? We are back, and we're getting very close. I think over the next year or two, we'll be able to declare that we're kind of at full employment. The real question, and the thing you're going to hear a lot about, is do we have to worry about a new downturn? Because when you look, here we are, 8 years into recovery. These things don't last more than 6 to 9 years. If you look at all of our history since the NBER has been recording this, go back to Civil War to the present, or when I'm in Richmond, it's the War of Northern Aggression. These things don't last more than 6 to 9 years. So there are two ideas popping up that you'll hear. People are telling you, you've got to prepare for a new downturn in the next couple of years, next year or the year after. What's going on in their minds is there's two stories. One is just, it's been 8 years, it's time. Well, that's not when you think about cycles, it's not about time. It's about economic conditions that we're dealing with. And the kind of economic conditions that we normally worry about, that we've seen that trip us up, are we either have inflation overheating or some kind of financial debacle, speculation or something that happens that throws us off course. Honestly, when you look at what's going on around the country, I think our economy is much better balanced than it's been. Part of it's, by the way, related to what happened to the millennials, because if you can't find a job and you have to go back to school and you have to postpone life decisions, that's the reason why our housing industry has been the slowest to recover. It's our housing industry, which is very interest sensitive. They react quickly to what the Fed does, which often gets us into trouble. The economy stumbles, Fed cuts rates, they come roaring back because the housing sector is doing better, and the Fed is a little slow to move interest rates. And that's often the thing that throws us off course. But the fact that our housing sector has been relatively slow in recovering is a reason to believe that we're fairly more balanced. Cindy and I were talking earlier. There are a lot of people, she raised a question that's on a lot of people's minds. Do we have to worry that the changing of the guard in Washington is going to be backtracking on a lot of things that we did during the financial crisis, or we have to worry about a new financial debacle? I would say that the way I think about this is whenever I'm driving and we get a little bit of drizzle, I start freezing and I start driving very carefully. And I make sure there's more distance between me and the car in front. And the reason is because when I was in college, I had a car accident in conditions like that. And the point of that is to say that we learn lessons from the mistakes we make. And the big mistake that people learned in the financial crisis was the way we finance housing in this country is people buy mortgage-backed securities. The mortgage-backed securities provide the funding that goes through the financial system that supports our system. So if investors are buying mortgage-backed securities without adequate realization of risk, then credit's too easy. And what's happened in the last cycle was the investor community around the world learned that Americans actually walk when their property goes underwater. I can't tell you how many Europeans tell me, we thought that lending to an American is like student loans. You can't walk from it. So if you are an investor buying mortgage-backed securities, not cognizant of the danger when things get out of line, they might go back. That's the lesson everybody learned. And I think we'll make mistakes. There'll be different mistakes, but I don't think you'll see the investor community providing credit at the terms that they did in the last. So I don't worry as much about this myself. I think there was a huge lesson that people learned from that period. Now, the fifth question: if slow growth hasn't prevented us from getting back on our feet, does slow growth matter? And the point is, you've seen these pictures before. I don't want to steal the thunder of my panelists, but I think you should know about this because this is what we all debate here. Slow growth matters because of what the CBO has been telling us for a long time. That the expectation always was that we always knew about this demographic in the U.S., and we knew that eventually as the U.S. population growth slows down, it's going to be slowing down the growth of the population. And it's going to create a big problem for our entitlement programs, for healthcare spending in particular. And this picture is the CBO's projections of various categories of government spending. The shaded areas are. And the black line is, what if revenues stay where they have been staying for the last 100 years? What if revenues stay at 18% of GDP? If so, and we don't do anything, federal spending for various programs is going to be growing steadily, and what was a cyclical deficit during the recession then morphs into a structural deficit. And as their story has been telling us, it's the healthcare sector that is the big issue, the green shaded zone. So why growth matters is it doesn't really prevent you from getting back on your feet, but a slower pace of growth because of the demographics means that it's going to be harder to pay for the promises that we've made over the course of the years. And if we could grow faster, 3 to 4%, it would mask some of that burden. What it means is if we don't do anything, and a slow-growing economy and a healthcare system that's not managing resources as well as we'd like, means that the working-age population is going to be carrying a bigger and bigger load of financing all these promises that we've made for the generation that's retiring. So this is why growth does matter. It's going to be the core of your story for as long as we live. This is going to be it's not an easy problem to solve, and this is why what goes on in what the underlying pace of growth matters for the U.S. For the U.S. economy and the fiscal outlook. Now, one final thing before we quit. People say to me, well, look, if you guys are right and the U.S. economy is doing so well, we got back on our feet, and maybe it was the best recovery, maybe it wasn't, but it's good enough recovery. Why are there so many, what's all this unhappiness about in the middle part of the country? Why are people so frustrated with the performance of the economy? And I think this is, for those of us who live on the coasts, I really think if you don't travel to the middle part of our country, you don't know this story. I'm lucky that I have to visit. I go to Akron and Detroit and Cleveland and Cincinnati, and I see this, I've been seeing this story play out for quite some time. So Tuesday night, November 8th, it began to dawn on me that I should have known about this theme that was coming out of Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. And here's the story. Our economy is doing fine. The problem is that we're living in a time of dramatic innovation, technological change, and it's displacing a lot of routine work. And you could argue, you out here, we have the technology sector here. In the East Coast, we've got the financial sector. You could argue that we're all living with this. How is this any different from anybody who lives in Ohio? The problem is, if you look at what's going on in the tech sector and the financial sector, yeah, there's a lot of disruption. A lot of the guys that I knew when I first went to JP Morgan who were on the trading desk, they're not there anymore because computers are doing some of that work. But the thing is, when you look at the number of jobs in financial sector and in the tech sector and in the ag sector, in areas where our economies on the coast, they're the same number of jobs that we had 20 years ago. It's just there's a lot of change, but there's still the same number of jobs, so we have opportunities. So when people lose a job, they find something else. If you look at what's going on in the industrial economy, not so. Not so. We used to have 20 million people working in manufacturing, and today there's 12 million people. So 8 million jobs have gone. Where'd they go? It wasn't Mexico and China that stole them. It's the robot in the factory that stole the job. And you look at this and you say, and that's what this blue shaded zone is showing you, the number of jobs we had in manufacturing. And the top line is showing you the value of what we produce in our factories is basically hasn't changed that much relative to the size of our economy. So what it tells you is we're not shipping factories somewhere else and we're just moving all manufacturing to another part of the world. The value of what we do has changed. Some things go to Mexico, some things go to Beijing, but the value of what comes out of our factories is the same, but the number of people in there has gone down, and it's because of innovation. And so the problem is, you look at this and you say, well, what's the big deal? This is life. This has been going on for a long time. And look, unemployment has come back down to a normal level, so doesn't that mean that people found jobs? Yeah, they found the jobs, but guess what? The jobs they found are not paying them the same thing that the jobs they had. And that's what's really unique about what's going on in the industrial economy. And I think most folks in that area, in that belt, know what's going on. They know about innovation, they see it, they know why their job disappeared. But it's easy, so I don't even know if they believe when someone tells them Mexico stole your job. I'm not really sure if they believe that. But I think what we sense from the election is there's a lot of frustration. And to me, that's the beauty of elections, is it's not healthy for our country, for all of us on the coast to be doing well and somebody else not doing well. We're all better off. It's more stabilizing if everybody's in the game. And so I think what elections do is they detect stresses and strains, and it makes you focus on issues. We don't know whether we can fix this problem. The solution to this problem, frankly, is to put more money into job skills training, because there's like 5.5 million job openings out there that people can't find the people to fill because they don't have the skills. So one final thought, and that is the following. Sometimes people have this idea that globalization is behind all this turmoil that's going on. We economists have a hard time with that story because, frankly, Yeah, it's easy to see the job that went to Beijing or Mexico. It's hard to see the job that was created out of this process of a world around us that's growing and developing. And I think it's important to understand where the world is to know what this globalization is all about. I'm sure there are trade abuses. There are things that we need to address. Some of our clients complain about abuses, Chinese coming through Mexico in the steel industry. But frankly, the way I think about the world, which is really the core of my optimism about the times that we're living in, is we in the U.S. are really blessed because we have a high living standard, so does Europeans and Japanese. And when you think about why are trades so out of balance, why is there so much going on, why are we so focused on globalization as the cause of our problems, it's because the world is all very uneven. And what this picture is showing you is the living standard of various regions around the world relative to the U.S. level. So the dark blue line, the dark blue bars are where we are today. The lighter blue is where if you extrapolate trends that are going on right now, where will we be by mid-century? And what it shows you is the living standard of the Asian region, 10 to 20% of our living standard. So it's kind of hard to see, to us economists and to my business clients all over the place, the reason we've gone global is because people recognize that in Asia in particular, there are people who aspire to climb out of the swamp that they were in. And their aspiration is to try to climb to our level of living standard. And what that means is there's a lot of opportunity coming our way. We're living at a time where other parts of the world are finally able to get on their feet and want what we have. And their success is not coming at our expense. China's living standard is rising and ours is still rising. And what this means to everybody in the business community, and the reason people are a little nervous about this anti-globalization theme that you hear in the election, is that we see this picture as the promise of lots of opportunity in the future. As the Asian region's living standard rises to our living standard, we're going to see massive new opportunities. This is where the new growth is going to be. And we benefit when we help them try to achieve what we have done. So for us economists, globalization is the promise, not the culprit of what's going on in our industrial economy. It's really innovation that is the disruptive process, something that we've seen many times. But I'm guessing 10 years from now, we're not going to be talking much about this because I think if there are opportunities, we're going to find, as we are finding in the community college system, that folks are figuring out how to develop job skills training programs. And when kids find out where the opportunities are and the pay rises, you're going to see people go into those opportunities. So I really think it's a stressful time. It's disruptive, but I think there is a lot of promise in the future. So thank you.